This is Antic, the Atari 8-Bit podcast. I'm Kevin Savitz. Steve Stone worked at Atari from 1977 through 1980, where he was a chip layout designer and engineer. He worked on the layout design for the POKEY and ANTIC chips. After Atari, he founded Macro Dienamics Incorporated, a chip design firm that worked on custom chips for the Amiga computer. This interview took place on August 29, 2016.
Before Atari, I was at National Semiconductor. I started before that in Southern California for some other companies, Rockwell and so forth. So I was working at Atari. It was kind of a combination of video games, calculators, control-oriented processor type things. And I did work on a game there. I think it was called Adversary, which was a paddle game with some objects that you knock out. It's similar to a breakout concept, if you will. And I worked there under Rich Simone, who was the, engineering manager at the time. And he went over to Atari and pretty much recruited me over there, as well as several other players in the chip development area. Doug Neubauer, Mark Shue, some of the people I worked with on Pokey.
So this game system you had done at National Semiconductor, did that ever become a product, or?
I think it was a short-lived product. I don't know. I think it kind of died on the vine at some point. But I think they were out there a little bit. But my recollection, again, it was not nearly compared to what happened with Atari. So they just kind of got run over. So, but I had about 8 years of chip experience, if you will, going into Atari. So, I have much better clarity also now from your side. So,
good, excellent. Okay, so it sounded like people started to defect National Semi to go to Atari, and you jumped on that boat.
Yeah. I don't know if it was I would categorize it as a defection. It was just it looked like a very good opportunity. And I like Rich. Rich became my boss there at Atari as well, and a great one. He had kind of a laissez-faire attitude there, and I think when you hire talented people, which I would include myself in, it was a good management style, I think. So we had a lot of fun over there. So that's how I got there.
And this was 1977 or so, right?
77. That's correct. Yeah.
So what did they put you to work doing? Did you go straight to Pokey, or were there other things first?
No. At that, it was so one of the first things that happens. They had several single-story buildings on the Atari campus in Sunnyvale at that time, and there was no room for me and one of the other layout designers in the hardware group. So they put us over in the building next door, which was I was surrounded by the early game programmers. Which was to me a real boon to have the opportunity to be around those people. I would like to say that hardware is kind of generally more analytic and not as creative as, let's say, video game programming. To my mind, anyway. So it was a fun group to be around. My first assignment was to do a chip that was, I believe it was a snake game or a centipede, something like that. And the idea at that time was to actually design the chips in hardware as opposed to so much programming. They felt that the limits of the current Atari game system could be improved by doing it this way. But I think they later found out that during the process, the game programmers got much sharper and started doing things that they were quite surprised they could do. And so this is my understanding of it. So that project did not get finished. And there was about, 3 or 4 chips like that were designed to be pure, much more hardware intensive with chips that drive them. So that ended, and we moved into the new building, a 2-story building, grouping all of us together, and moved on to the Atari 400, 800 group. So that's kind of how that developed. And the chip I got was POKEY, which is, I'm sure by now it's quite well known as to what that stands for. When I first heard it, I thought they were trying to describe me in some way. It was that was I worked with Doug Neubauer on that, which I can't say enough great things about. Really a talented, cooperative, fun guy to work with, and so as this was quite common among a number of us that worked at Atari in those days, it was a really wonderful collaborative effort going on in what we were doing, and it was still all fun and games, but a lot of work and an enjoyable work at the time as well. So
nice.
Yeah.
So they put you to work on POKEY. Now, I don't know anything about chip layout design, modern or back in the day. So I'd like to spend a little time talking about what the job entailed. I was at I mean, were you given spec, or were you given like a general layout? Then you actually had to physically do the roadmap on the boards. And I understand there's red tape involved. And tell me what I don't know about layout design in the 70s.
Okay, I'll try to summarize that a little bit. At that time, we had a Data General computer, I think a 16-bit big box about the size of a refrigerator today, and a disk that I believe had maybe, I think 25 and maybe 80 kilobytes of memory, but it was the size of a washing machine as well. It would shake when you started it up and so forth. So this was the tool we would ultimately get the design to. Their team was broken up into, like in POKEY as an example, Doug Neubauer was the logic designer. I believe Mark Shue was the circuit designer. So he would design, Doug would design the logic to the spec, whatever that we were working on, and Mark would do the device sizing, and then I would do the layout. So I did the physical design of what the chip actually looks like. And that was at that time a bit of a hybrid. We would draw this on a grid and have nesting and so forth, but you're physically just drawing each transistor and element and wire in a very accurate way on a grid, and then that would go to a board that was called a digitizer. It had XY coordinates with a readout, and they would put in each coordinate for every corner of a polygon for each level of the mask that they would have, maybe 11 masks of connections and transistors and so forth. And then you could edit this once it was on the system. You would edit it on the computer, which had a green screen. We didn't have color at the time, and it was a fairly good size, though it was probably maybe 21 inches. At that time was a pretty good size. And we had a pen, so we had a pen that would, and a tablet, and we had, we would go ahead and modify things online at that time and do some design as well. So, and that was kind of my thing. I had some versatility at editing online and creating things online before it had really become what they call now online design, which it's all online. And so that's kind of how the process worked. And then you would check things we had a checking program on there that would check the parameters of, let's say, wires to each other or their widths and so forth to make sure that it meets the rules that the wafer fab company, which I believe in this case was Centertech, was one of the sources, that would meet their design rules, their specs, so that they could actually build the thing. Right, and then the other side of this was checking to see if we had everything in there correctly in terms of schematic versus layout. So that verification, and we did that by hand. We would plot this chip out, and then one person would read out from the schematic where an input to an AND gate and the output goes to an inverter, and the other person would actually trace this on the plot and see that it did do that. And once, if you find an error, you fix the error, you replot, and so forth. So that's kind of the process to get through that. And then at the end, there was something called tape out, which is the word that's still used today for sending the information to the people that are going to actually fabricate the part. So that's kind of the procedure. So this, in the actual doing of that task, your imagination you have to see things a little bit like a chess set in planning how you lay these things out together to make sense out of them. And coming from a semiconductor background, size was always an important part of the task, because the larger the chip is, the more money it costs to make, and so forth. So that was kind of how the procedure then.
So how
did that give you any clarity at all?
No, absolutely. Thank you. So how long did it take to lay out Pokey?
I really don't know how long. I know that it would take a while. I would say months, not years or anything, but months. We had 3 chips we were doing at the time. I think there was ANTIC along with Pokey and the TIA or GTIA, and Pokey was the first one to be done, which was good. And then I moved over and I helped out on ANTIC as well, so used my time there. I can't tell you the exact time, but that was going on. And back to Doug for a second, I'd like to say that he was in the lab working on a game called Star Raiders, I believe, or Star Raider, I'm not sure, at the time. And so he had enough time after finishing his job that he could do that, and then assist me in anything that I might need. So, and one of the things I'd like to get to in this is talk. One of the things that I did at Atari, other than the layout, was I consider myself one of the chief kibitzer, if you will,
yeah.
So I had a number of my friends were the game programmers, and once again, from being set in that location, it gave me an opportunity to. We didn't have game testers then, so I would go over and play the games and add input, and so I had a lot of input into the games that I would like to address later. So if we get a chance, but.
Sure. Do you want to do that now? Is why it's on your mind? Let's.
Sure. Well, I'll go to since I mentioned Doug and his game, which was really fun. And this was back in the lab. He would have it demonstrated in there. And he had some stars moving around like this, and he could control them with the joystick. And so I thought that was really cool. And both Doug and I had played a game on this Kalma machine. This is the machine that we actually did the layout on over at National. And they had one game on there, and it was a Star Trek sort of game where you had these quadrants, if you will, matrix of boxes, and there would be Klingons, in these. So you would fire away and land in one of these quadrants, and then you have to destroy these Klingons. So we both had that knowledge and like that. And of course, Star Wars had been released, I believe, by that time. So I suggested that, and I was interested in what I called first-person graphics. So this is where you're looking at the objects and whatever. So I suggested he do something where it's first-person, and of course I added the idea of red alert and shields and little things, and by the way, in all this, I'm not saying that I'm taking credit for these. These programmers and came up with their own thoughts and decided what they put in games, but nonetheless, I had a lot of fun being able to add little pieces of ideas, whether they took them or not, and so that game was really close to me because I enjoyed the whole idea of Klingons, and some people were really, angry at Klingons. They really just wanted to kill them. So there was a lot of that in there too. So, but anyway, so that was fun doing that. And then, with other games, I know that my friend Jim Heather, which fortunately enough, I get to see him maybe once a year now when I come out this way. And Heather did what games? He did flag capture. And I really liked he had a skydiver game and so forth. And I added some input to his games with that. And so it was pretty fun doing that. And I think that one that I'd like to highlight is another friend of mine, Warren Robinette, who designed a game called Adventure, another Atari VCS, right? Classic. And Atari was, we would, get together, drink beer, 5 o'clock or whatever, or 12 o'clock, I suppose, if you felt like it. But we'd just kind of BS a little bit about different ideas and so forth. So trading ideas. And I remember distinctly in my office, I had a corner office in the second floor, really luxury thing for me. And but so it was a place to hang out. So a lot of people would come in. And I remember talking to Warren. We were drinking Heineken back in those days. And I remember talking to Warren distinctly, and I said, you know what you ought to do, Warren, is I think you ought to have a hidden room in your game. And he says, really? He said, yeah. He said, well, what would you do with that? And I said, well, I'd offer a prize. And he said, like an Easter egg. And honestly, I didn't know the term, so he explained to me what that term meant. And I said, yeah. And he says, inquisitively asked him, he said, well, would you tell marketing about it? And I said, expletive deleted, no. And hell no. I mean, they might really screw it up. Keep it hidden. Offer the prize. Don't tell anyone about it. Oh, okay. Now, I want to say that doesn't mean that he took my idea. He may have already had the idea and just didn't want to divulge it in that way. So I'm not trying to take anything away from Warren's creation. And in all cases, they created the games. I'm just the kibitzer. So, but it was, so it was fun. And that's, to me, that was an example of, probably the best example I can give you of how I was able to kind of float around occasionally and add a few things here or there. We were, we were having a good time.
That sounds like that's one of the amazing things about an environment like that is you just have all these smart people with ideas and they're free flowing and take what you want and
yes,
share.
Yeah, and that's truly the wonderful part of it, or a wonderful part of it, I should say. There's more, but that was certainly a lot of fun to be around a bunch of smart people that were also, as you say, cooperative, and got along with each other. We had a lot of fun. It is a games company, though, right? So you would think there should be. So,
sure. I just want to circle back again and just say I was certainly, of course, familiar with Star Raiders and familiar with the Star Trek mainframe game. And now that you've said it, the connection is just like completely obvious. And yet, for 30 years, I never noticed that, Star Raiders is basically a pretty version of Star Trek.
Yeah. Oh, good. I'm glad you knew that game. That's pretty good. That was a long time ago. But I think, we didn't play that a lot. This was at National, so we weren't a games company where Atari was. I mean, with that, it was such a switch. I mean, we had a coffee room at every one of these facilities, and you'd go and get coffee, and there would be a coin-op game next to it. And in the one-story building, so right when I got there, we had a breakout game in there. So you click the little thing. You don't have to put in the coin, but you click it to initiate the game and play a game. You get a cup of coffee and you play the game and go back to work. So you get a little break in there. So Breakout was the game that I would play, and maybe I drank a lot of coffee, but I got really good at this game. So the trick was to, maybe I'm getting too far off track here. We would, so I'd play this game, and you this was a game designed by Steve Jobs and Wozniak, right? And I didn't know that at the time. I just knew the game. But you'd break through the walls. You get rid of all the bricks. The paddle would get small after the first group or whatever, and accelerates the speed of the ball. And you found that if you got rid of both these bricks, groups of bricks, and then you move the ball to a certain spot, you could actually take your hands off and it would stay in this loop. And so that was the object, and so on one ball. And then so the next person that comes in can recognize that, well, someone has defeated the game, So I got to where, and once again, maybe I drank too much coffee, but I got to where I could do it right-handed or left-handed. And I was working on doing it with a mirror, left-handed, with my back turned to it to see if I could do it then. And I remember one of the engineers, Francis Michel, I think he may have worked on ANTIC, I'm not sure. But he wanted to get no one by to see this, if I got it to with a mirror behind my back, left-handed, just for the fun of it. So, but fortunately, we moved and we found another game to play, and I did that. But so fun and games it was.
Nice.
Yeah.
All right. So then what? I mean, you're doing layout design on Pokey. You finished that. It sounds like you moved on to ANTIC, did more of the same there. Any stories particular there?
Yeah, I helped on that. Prior to that, the first chip, and I want to say that the for the first VCS game, I think it was codenamed Stella, but I may be wrong.
No, that's right.
And it was done prior to the time I got there, of course. But having a lot of experience at layout, I immediately recognized that functionally it might have been fine, but physically it was it wouldn't meet my standards at all. So I remember pointing out to Rich Simone that I said, hey, I could redo this chip, and we could save a lot of money. And I think we did a calculation, and we thought, well, with whatever they were producing at the time, it might be a gain of about $800,000 to do it. And I'd kind of pushed for doing that, and I said, well, you could just, this would be a sizable bonus pool for the group, so we don't have to maybe push so hard for getting bonuses. We could just create them and just say, hey, we're going to do this for bonus money alone. And I was willing to give it an effort. So I did get a chance to do some of that after they decided not to just do that, but to try to cut down the cost of the entire system. And so I was working on that. I don't recall the code name exactly. I want to say Connie, but I don't know if that was true. They used a lot of, as you know, probably a lot of female names, or Pokey was an acronym, some of that, but most of them had some female person's name attached to them. And I could not, maybe it wasn't Connie, but I'm thinking it might have been. And I got somewhat through that in design, but I moved on from that and left Atari. This was in, I think, after the first quarter of 1980. So
why did you leave?
I started my own company and doing design services. Mm-hmm. I didn't feel that the company was really headed in the right direction so much. No one was now removed. They had Ray Kassar. I didn't know him well, but the concept of someone flying in from Manhattan for the week and wearing $1,000 suits, being chauffeured around the valley and then flying out on the weekends was quite a contrast to, I remember, Nolan Bushnell coming in with a Heineken into the coffee room, playing tank with him, and he's sitting on the floor as we're chatting. So I didn't have a great relationship. I didn't talk to him all the time, but it was, you can see the difference in scope there. Yeah. And, Warner had taken over. I was on the Warner payroll. I did get bonuses, so that was good, but not everyone did. The Activision people, Larry and Al and so forth, Bob Whitehead and Dave Crane, I think, were the group that they departed because they felt they weren't getting properly paid and so forth. So, you could see it changed to me, and it seemed like a good time to, depart.
Yeah.
Mentioning Al Miller, I have to throw another kibitz thing in here, if you don't mind.
Not at all.
So, once again, back in the same lab, there was one lunch that I went back there, and they had taken a photograph of Al Miller with a Coke can in his hand, and then digitized this and put it up on display on the Atari 800 development system. And it was pretty cool looking to see that, and it gave me an idea right away. So as we were leaving, after the lunch, I'm walking back, and I said, "Hey, Al Miller," I said, "You know what I think would be cool is if you could do a golf game and have Pebble Beach and have, the hole presented, and then have a swing, and then let's say you hook or slice, then present a slide that shows where you are from your next shot." And he said, "Oh, okay." So that was about all I got from that. But it wasn't too long afterwards that I did see a game that Activision, I believe, produced. It was a Jack Nicklaus golf game or something like that, and it was pretty much exactly as I described. Now, the same thing goes. I don't know if I inspired the idea or he just had the idea, whatever. But and in all cases, I was just glad to see that happen. So
yeah, awesome.
But anyway, so I felt like it was time to move on. I'm still pretty interested in game development, but started my own business, which was a IC layout consulting service.
This was Macro Dienamics?
Macro Dienamics, or MDI. That's right. So went out and did that.
And you said when you were there, you helped do some of the chip layout for Amiga. Is that right?
Yes, and this was and I think you kind of with your mentioning of Jody Cure kind of connected me back to that time. And so we did worked for a number of startups. Maxim Integrated Circuits, a very large company now. We helped them with their first or second chip, and a lot of other companies did a lot of chips, and had a staff of other layout designers working under my direction. And I was actually in Long Island working on a chip, and a short-term thing for a company back there, and I got a call from Jay Miner. And I really liked Jay Miner, and Jay had, I mentioned the checking before, where we would hand check the layout. And Jay had an opportunity to check one of those for me, like an I/O or something. For some of my work, and he was just astounded at the creativity I'd put into that design. So I think he really kind of liked my abilities from that point forward. So he gave me a call and asked if we'd be willing to work on his stuff, help out, and so forth. He really wanted me to come do this and pleaded with me to do it. And of course, it sounded great to me at the time, and I said sure. So came back to California, and we were working on some of their chips for the Amiga. And it did not go so well for us. I mean, the chip layout, I made maybe a sort of a classic mistake that I put too many of my resources onto one company. And so Amiga ran into some financial problems. But they didn't tell me that. They just said, well, we're going to not be able to, we're going to pay you, but it's going to be a little bit late, whatever. And, we just kept working but not receiving money. And, later I found out there was a lot more going on behind the scenes that I wasn't aware of. And I think that it pretty much ended my company because we got so far in debt but we had money to pay our employees, but it was like barely. And so they were all highly talented people. So my partner Roy Davison and myself suggested that they look for other opportunities, which they were snatched up in a hurry. So that all worked out for them. But for Roy and myself, it pretty much ended our company, which we had for about 6 years. So that's why I say a bit of a sore spot with me. And I think that, I would talk to, most of my interface was with Dave Morse, I think was the president, and Jay. And Jay would just kind of smile, and he was he was pretty Santa Claus-like in his appearance to me, and always, very nice. And I don't think he wanted to, he probably just felt he couldn't say anything and knew the spot that they were in. And but anyway, it strung out for a while financially and hurt us. And I think that we may have worked on all three or two of those chips. I know Agnes was one that we worked on, and I don't remember the engineers. I know Joe was there. I don't remember having a lot of interface with Joe. And once again, I should make it clear I have no anger or anything towards Joe or anything like that. It's only the connection that when Jay unfortunately has passed a number of years ago, and once again, I don't think it was his fault. I just wish they had given us a different attitude. If they had said, here's what we're doing, we're having these problems, we'll make it right, whatever. It would have been different, but we ultimately had to hire an attorney, go after him for the money. They settled out of court. We lost money. We got our money, but lost some to the attorneys, so it was kind of a losing situation, and I think it could have been better. And I know it was a great product, I think, for its time. So,
yeah.
Anyway, so that was that connection.
How do you keep yourself busy today?
I'm in school online, so I'm doing that.
What are you studying?
Well, I'm actually getting a business degree, and I'm looking at technology and marketing currently. I don't know. I'm close to getting that degree, and I may go on from there. I live in Massachusetts now. I'm actually on Cape Cod, and but I'm, I recently had a voice conversation about taking a position at one of the larger technology companies that will remain unnamed at this time, but
Sure.
it looks pretty good. So I may be actually in Silicon Valley again shortly.
Wow.
We'll see how it goes. Yeah.
Awesome. And when you go back, will you be doing that same chip design again, or have you moved on?
Yes, I think it's going to be chip design, some leadership position in chip design for some new products. So I think that would be fun. Yeah. I should mention to you also, back to Amiga and leaving Atari and going over and starting my own thing. I did have a side project that I was working on, or something we would do after hours. And we were actually, my friend Tom Yap, who just recently has gained a new patent for a brand new microprocessor architecture. It should be interesting to watch, but he and I worked together. What I felt was missing at that time were better graphics. So these, you go back to those early games, and difficult as they were to design in the space that they were allowed, the graphics seemed to be to me the thing. If you can make the graphics better, that's really what we want to see. And of course, today they're quite good. But at the time, I figured out, that if we could use this other space out here to show graphics, which in this case was the laser disc, if you remember this. This is before they had DVDs or compact discs. They had just had this large laser disc.
Sure.
So I learned how to program in assembly language and designed a football game. And then we would attach it to the laser disc. And my concept was to have go from these pixels that are rather coarse in the 400, 800 game to then a vision of the same object in film. which was, maybe Roger Staubach at the time, and so then you'd see him, a close-up of his head in pixels, and then just kind of morph that into the graphics and then show the play and regular film off the laser disc. And there was a game that came out shortly after that called, I think, Dragon's Lair, a coin-op game that kind of used this. So we learned how to, jump around on the disc and connect the different parts. So in the football game, the concept was to be strategic, and someone would choose an offense and a defense, and then we would find the result based on whether, which ones matched or the best, So I showed it to Jay because we were working with Jay at the time, and I thought he might be interested. And so we gave him a little demonstration of that game. And he says, he says, maybe I'll have to have a port. I'll have to design a port for that, So I was hoping for money, give us some money so we can go ahead and produce this. But it didn't happen. I did talk to CBS about it, and they were connected to the Laserdisc because of their record line. I think they were, making these the same way. But the president of the company, I can't remember his time, he was interested, but he passed me on to somebody in their engineering department or VP of something, and he just seemed to be Silicon Valley-ish, and it's a bit ironic too to think about it because we were talking like you and I are, and all of a sudden he started talking about a plane flying through New York below the level of the buildings, and he was just all about this. And the irony to me is that, when I think about it, and then knowing what happened in New York much later, it was kind of weird to think back of that, it's a strange correspondence, don't get me wrong, but nonetheless, I remember it distinctly, him interrupting the conversation because there was a plane flying below the level of the building. So, But anyway, so that whole thing kind of was I also talked to Larry Kaplan about the idea over at his house, but we didn't get funding. I don't think that I had the knowledge, I think, to properly handle that. The development stuff, was going along okay, but getting the money was a little bit more challenging. And then at the same time, there was a bit of a fall off in the whole games idea on the consumer side. So. Yeah, so that was the end of my gaming ambition at the time. So I'll throw that in there.
Nice.
Yeah.
Is there anything else in the Atari realm that we haven't talked about that we should have?
Let's see. Let me think about that a second. Yeah, I know that there were some funny moments, I can tell you. I had a friend of mine, my future business partner, Roy Davison, come over to Atari one day. They were opening it was the day they opened up the gym and the hot tub. And so I took Roy downstairs for this, and there was a bunch of people around in there for the opening. And we were standing there, and there was a guy, putting in, wrenching away at the universal weight machine. He's just doing the assembly of this equipment. And out of nowhere comes, two naked guys, to remain nameless at this point in time, grab hold of our, I think it was the director of engineering, Wade Tuma, rather strong individual, and grab him by the legs. He had both arms around the weight machine and clutching on as they're trying to drag him to the hot tub. And they were successful in doing that. They got him there. And both myself and my partner, Roy, looked at the guy assembling the equipment, and we were wondering, what does he think of his first day at Atari? So I thought that was pretty good. So
nice.
Yeah. Also, I'd like to mention that to me, there was a distinct division. In high school, you might call them cliques. I don't know, but how you best define this between some of the game programmers. There was some that were like I would say Al Miller, Dave Crane, Bob Whitehead. More conservative in their approach to life. And then there was another group that were more on the liberal side, if I can just, I'm not talking about politically, but rather just openness to things. And, which include, Warren Robinette and Jim Heather and Tom Rudall. They kind of, were set together but separate, and so as an example, when Activision was formed, I don't think that group went there. I think, I think they went different directions, and but to me, that was quite apparent, this distinction between the personalities. So I just like to mention that. I seem to get along with both,
yeah,
which was a good thing for me.
Sure.
So, but there was that. I don't know if there's anything else I can add to it that I can think of at the moment, but I hated to see the company go away. It was, I have very fond memories of that time. It was, I don't know. I know a number of companies that probably tried to emulate it in some way, but I've yet to find one that's been as fun or as interesting. So, yeah. So.
I think I have what I need. Thank you so much.
Okay, well, it was a pleasure meeting you, and thanks for doing some of this history work.
Thank you.
It's a good thing. So
this was fascinating, and really appreciate your time.
Okay, thank you, Kevin.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye now.